Okay, you are listening to the award-winning Philadelphia Hall Monitor here on WPPM 106.5 in Philadelphia on Comcast Channel 66 and streaming live at phillycam.org. You can find us on Twitter at Hall Monitor WPPM, on our website www.hallmonitor.org, or on Facebook at PHMWPPM. Tonight on the program, we'll be joined by PICA Executive Director Marissa Waxman to discuss the final city budget. We'll review and discuss the upcoming property tax reevaluations, and Denise will tell us about yesterday's big Harris for President rally that took place at Temple University. The first thing we're going to do, though, is talk about the property taxes. Property taxes are going up this year. We're going to explain how all that works tonight on the show, and we're going to keep following up with this because it's going to be a quick turnaround if you want to appeal. Appeals are going to be due October 7th. That's coming up pretty quick, so it's only about 2 months. Before we get to that, though, we were at the press conference on Monday where Mayor Parker explained all the different programs and how everything went, how everything's going to go. So instead of us re-explaining it and cutting up the audio, I figured what I would do is just play the audio from the mayor telling you what's going to happen. So here is the audio from Monday's press conference.
Now, as we talk about the process and what it means for homeowners, it's very important to talk about our outreach campaign. Our outreach campaign to reach every
All right, we seem to be having some issues here, some technical issues. I'm not sure what's going on. Oh, there we go. Okay, I think we're back.
Philadelphia to ensure that they know about every tax relief program available to them as homeowners that will help them lower their property taxes. You can see some of them here, and thank you for the visuals. You know, Philadelphia, you know your mayor. I want to see, touch, and feel things. And for me, it's important to have displayed here today overviews of every property tax relief program in existence in our city here to help you. All of which we worked on with the City Council of Philadelphia, and I'm happy to see you here, Council Member Nina Ahmad. The first program that I want to remind you of is our homestead exemption. Thanks to Council President Kenyatta Johnson, all members of the City Council of Philadelphia, I signed an increase in the homestead exemption in June, and we signed that into law. That means the homestead exemption increases from $80,000 to $100,000. Council member Ahmad, every time I mention homestead exemption, I always have to go back and give people a bit of history, and that is the city of Philadelphia wouldn't be able to offer you a homestead exemption without getting enabling authority to do so. That was done during my tenure as a member of the Pennsylvania General Assembly, and a tool that I am extremely proud of. What's so great about this homestead exemption? You can save up to $1,399 on your property taxes just by signing up. If you already have a homestead, you don't have to do anything. If you're still enrolled, you will be saving more this year. And again, I want to say to you, Councilmember Ahmad, Councilmember Young, and to the leader of the City Council, Council President Kenyatta Johnson, thank you, thank you. And it was an honor and a privilege to work with you on this issue. Another tool that we would not have in existence had it not been for the enabling authority provided by the Pennsylvania General Assembly that we enacted also during those days in Harrisburg is LOOP. It's called the Long-Term Owner Occupant Program. LOOP puts a cap on how much your property taxes can increase if you meet certain income requirements and if you've owned your property for at least 10 years. That's what we refer to when we say long-term owner occupants. Rob Dubois is going to address LOOP when he speaks. The next tool is our senior real estate tax freeze. Seniors who meet income requirements and live in their home can freeze their property taxes for as long as they live there. Next is a very important tool. I remember working with our community legal services on making sure that we did as much as we possibly could to promote this tool. And this is what we refer to as UPA. UPA. It's the Owner Occupied Payment Agreement program. And it allows you to protect your home from sheriff's sale if you have a real estate tax debt by entering into a payment agreement. And you can enroll and you can make extremely affordable monthly payments. But we needed to have a tool so that no one was losing their home because of real estate tax debt. The next one is the low income tax freeze. This is a new tax relief program that I signed into law in June. I want to thank City Council and Council Member Jamie Gaultier, who worked extremely hard on this issue, for all of the work they put into this to make it happen. If you meet the income thresholds and you own and live in your home, you can save money on property taxes and freeze your bill to pay the same for years to come. Now, you're going to hear more from our Revenue Commissioner, Kathleen McColgan, in a bit about how Philadelphians can sign up for all of these programs, all of which are designed to help protect your interests in your home and shield you from the impact of property taxes and these revaluations. Now, we intentionally, because I learned this, Council Members Young and Ahmad, during my tenure in council, Philadelphia does a lot of good work and we have a lot of great programs to help our residents in a lot of different ways. But none of it means a thing if you, the people of the city of Philadelphia, don't know these programs are in existence. So we intentionally provided $1 million in my One Philly budget for the Revenue Department to do an extensive advertising and outreach campaign to let Philadelphians know about all of the ways that they can save on their property taxes. So it should not matter your zip code, your neighborhood, the programs that Revenue will use to market the availability of all of the supports available should touch you in one way or another. The city is interested in and is committed to using every tool in the toolbox which will complement our existing outreach efforts. Again, Commissioner McColgan is going to share with you what that means, but for me, I want to just give you a glimpse of. First, I'm going to be sending a letter to every residential homeowner in the city detailing the available tax relief programs and how to sign up for them directly. So look for a letter from your mayor soon, making sure that you hear directly from me. And that's going to be 345,000 homeowners right here in the city of Philadelphia. The next thing that we're going to do, we're going to engage our outreach teams to go door to door in our neighborhoods, particularly those that are most impacted by these new valuations, with easy to read information for homeowners, talking to people in a language that they are most comfortable with speaking and letting them know how to sign up for these programs. Somebody is watching this at home and they're saying, wait a minute, when I hear elected officials use that term, door to door is usually because they're knocking on my door asking for my vote. You would be absolutely right. But we're changing the status quo and the narrative and how we do business in the city of Philadelphia. So we're just not knocking on your door talking about a vote. How about we knock on your door to let you know what services and supports are available to help you reduce your property tax burden here. And that's not all we're going to do by a long shot. We're going to be on radio with this information. We're going to be on television with this information. We're going to be on the side of SEPTA buses. We're going to be everywhere with this straightforward message. And it's simply this: here is how you save on your property taxes. Now, before I say a bit more about those evaluations, I want to get to the next part. And then we're going to turn it over to the subject matter experts. I want to talk for a minute about how these revaluations and another important step that we took in my One Philly budget this year are going to help one of the most important constituencies in our city, and that is our school children. First, I want to remind everyone, because we don't want you to forget what we did in this budget. We increased the percentage of the real estate tax revenues that are allocated to the school district of Philadelphia from 55% up to 56%. That 1% increase for schools will generate approximately $125 million more for the school district of Philadelphia and thus our children over the next 5 years. Now, yeah, that's something we can all be happy about. We don't want to. Next, because of this revaluation process, the school district is going to see more tax revenues coming in over the next 5 years. Now, that's not the reason we did the revaluation. We did it to get more accurate assessments. But this does mean that the school district will realize $115 million more in additional revenues over 5 years. And that's after we account for enrollment in the homestead exemption and the new low-income tax freeze. Now, what does this mean? And this is very important, is that through the increase in revenues for schools and the result of the revaluation process, the school district of Philadelphia and our children are going to receive nearly $240 million more in needed revenue over the next 5 years. $240 million. That's what we're delivering. So as challenging as this moment can be, and we recognize that it can be challenging, we're going to make sure that we're communicating directly with every Philadelphia homeowner impacted by these valuations. And our job is to connect you directly with every tool that we have in the toolbox to help you. And you don't need to have a hookup or a connection to anybody to get access to any of these programs that you are eligible for. It is our job as the city of Philadelphia to make sure that you are fully aware of what is available. And I was also a member of the City Council of Philadelphia, a district council member, and Councilmember Young, I know district council members are going to be doing everything that they can to make sure that every property tax support tool is made known to their constituents in their respective districts as well. And so while you've heard me mention the school district, we talked about our marketing, you need to know that revaluations are done to make sure that the assessed values are accurate. Why does this matter? When residential markets are strong, like they have been in Philadelphia, assessments go up. Now, understanding that impact, we've worked closely with City Council to put in place these new relief measures to reduce the impact of any increases on property taxes for homeowners. And Rob DeBow is going to go into the data. He's going to peel back the layers. Before he does, I want to note this for the record, and I want folks to hear this directly from me. Because of the reassessment, average residential property tax bills will go up next year by about $330 for homeowners signed up for the homestead exemption. Want to be clear about that. Let me just say several more things. No one ever wants to see their property taxes go up. And rest assured, as the mayor, I would love to be able to have a magic wand and to say that no one's property taxes would ever go up while I was the mayor. But unfortunately, that's not what the law requires. I'm going to make a promise that I made in my first One Philly budget in March when I proposed it, that the budget would include no new taxes. And I kept that promise. And somewhere, somehow, there's going to be someone who tries to make a connection that, yes, while there was no direct increase in taxes, caused by this budget in and of itself, the city of Philadelphia did do revaluations, and people saw their property taxes go up. There were no tax rate increases in the proposed or adopted budget. Philadelphia, I am proud to say that we made good on our commitment. There were no changes to the property tax rates here during this budget process. However, the revaluation process, again, is required by law, and it's an important part of how the city of Philadelphia keeps property values fair and equitable and accurate. And those issues are also extremely important. There's one more place in helping Philadelphia homeowners improve, maintain, and stay in their homes that I want to note that is valuable while we're talking about this process. And it's a core priority of the Parker administration. I want to highlight a number of existing city housing programs that help homeowners stay in and improve their homes. These programs are also readily available for every homeowner and are ones that I have been a champion on long before I became your mayor. The first one, because this is the question that some Philadelphians will raise. I need work done in my house. Yes, it's always an honor to know that the value of a property that you own has increased in value. But what about when I need to make some repairs? Here are the tools that we have available here in the city. One, Basic Systems Home Repair. It provides free major system repairs to correct electrical, plumbing, heating, structural, carpentry, and roofing emergencies, and is available to eligible owner-occupied homes. If anyone is asking, well, what if I own multiple homes in the city of Philadelphia and I want to use Basic Systems Home Repair for 5 investment properties that I have? You are not eligible for those 5 investment properties. This is for the homes that you actually own, that you live in. Next, it's the Adaptive Modification Program. This helps low-income individuals with physical disabilities live more independently in their homes by providing free adaptations to a house or apartment and allowing easier access and mobility within their homes. 2, next, the Tangled Title Program. It offers assistance to eligible people who are unable to prove ownership of their property because their name is not on the deed. This interferes with wealth generation in families, particularly families of color, when they cannot realize the capital value of their home because maybe the patriarch or the matriarch, the owner of record, passed away, and there was no lawyer or accountant on retainer by the family to ensure that there was a will and just a natural transference of the wealth, and of that ownership of that property. We have a program available, and Philadelphians can get assistance. The next is one that a lot of people have been talking about and inquiring about recently. It is called Restore, Repair, Renew. It helps eligible homeowners access low interest loans that fund a range of home repairs, focusing on health, safety, weatherization, accessibility, and quality of life. That's extremely important because even if you do own your own house, but you don't have perfect credit, some people can't go straight to the prime banking market to get a home repair loan. Well, you can get a loan for up to $50,000 from the city of Philadelphia with 10 years to pay it back, 3% fixed interest rate, and a credit score as low as 580. Restore, Repair, Renew, you can apply for it. Next is the Neighborhood Infrastructure Driveway Repair Program. Marion Tasco is clapping at home right now. This program provides for repairs of shared driveways that provide vehicular access, car access to private parking for 5 or more private residences. We know that the repaving of crumbling driveways with aging infrastructure in the city is a problem in and of itself, and we wish we had the capital dollars to just fix them all at once. But because we don't, we do have this whole home repair program that seeks to assist this driveway repair program, because whole home repair helps expands existing established home repair programs citywide to support more residents with a wide range of repairs and improvements. I need to thank our state senator Vincent Hughes and Nikhil Saval. They worked extremely hard on that program. And the next is Built to Last. This delivers critical home repairs, health and safety improvements, energy efficiency, and clean energy improvements to ease households' cost of living and state of health. Now listen, every one of these housing programs are important to me and the city of Philadelphia, but somebody's watching this somewhere, somehow, and say, I heard her go through these programs, but I've never heard of them before. That's our fault. We're going to do our best to make sure we get that information directly to you. You matter. Help is available. We want you to stay in your homes. We want you to have a number to call, not just a website to go to, but we want you to have a number to call to get the help you need. And that number is 215-686-9749. Again, that's 215-686-9749, or you can go to www.phila.gov and search housing programs. Rob, did I get it all out?
Okay. That was the mayor talking to us a little bit about property taxes and reassessments. We're going to go through it a little bit here too. But before we do that, I'd like to bring in Denise Clay-Murray. Denise, how are you tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
Fine, thank you. A little unusual that we played a clip that long, but the mayor kind of said all the stuff we were going to say. So why not just hear it from her?
Right.
But I'd like to talk a little bit more about the property taxes. And just so people know, this is something we're going to spend a lot of time on, certainly between now and October. And the reason why October is important is because that's when the appeals are due. So we want everybody to know about that. We want to keep talking about this. You're going to see this in our newsletters. We've made flyers. So, if you have neighbors, share it with your neighbors, because this is stuff everybody needs to know about. And the turnaround time this year is much shorter than it was in years past. Last time they did a property assessment, it was in May. Now it's only 2 months between now and the time you can appeal. So the first thing I'd like to show you, if I can bring that up, just a couple little facts about this. What are property tax reassessments? Well, they're supposed to be conducted every year. The last time they were conducted was in 2021, and there are 580,000 properties in the city that all get reviewed. And you're probably wondering, well, how do they do that? They don't sit there and count them all individually, that's for sure. So what does it mean? The total assessed values of all properties in the city have risen by 11% over the last year. This is going to cause residential tax bills to go up on average by $330. Meanwhile, office building assessments have decreased by 6%. And that's due to, people still working remotely and what have you. And by council district, the numbers are different. So in the first district, for example, property taxes are going to go up by $539 a year or $259 if you have the homestead exemption, which everybody should get. Everybody can apply for the homestead. It's an easy thing to do. We're going to talk about that in a second. Second district, $475 per person, $195 if you have the homestead. Third district, $660, $380 if you have the homestead. Fourth district, $646, $380 if you have the homestead. The fifth district, $553, $273 if you have the homestead. The sixth, $618, $338 if you have the homestead. The seventh, $420, $140 if you have the homestead. The eighth district, $667, $387 if you have the homestead. The ninth district, $629, $349 if you have the homestead. And in the 10th, $979, $699 if you have the homestead. OPA the Office of Property Assessment will mail written notices of the new values in August. They should be out already. Property values are expected to be uploaded to the property search application around the same time, property.phila.gov. Mine was up today. So I did get a look at it. I recommend everybody go and look at property.phila.gov sometime today, not during the show. After the show.
Wait until the show's over.
Wait till 7:01. But take a look at that because you're going to see what your numbers are, and will also tell you what your property taxes will be with the homestead. It'll show you what that is. I really recommend people do that now. If you think your assessment is too high, appeal it. But get that appeal in quick because the deadline's October 7th and it's going to come up before you know it. All right? So the first level review deadline is October 7th. The Board of Revision of Taxes appeal is October 7th. Do them both. They're two separate things. Do them both. All right? And if you want more information on that, go to phila.gov/OPA. There's more information there about it. Okay? So here are some of the programs. The homestead exemption is for anyone who lives in their home as their primary residence. The average savings are almost $1,400 a year. The homestead will reduce the taxable value of your house by $100,000. So if your house is worth $500,000, you'll only be taxed for $400,000. All right, that makes a big difference. You can apply for that at phila.gov/homestead or call 215-686-9200. The deadline is December 1st for this program. But again, this is another thing, do it now. If you're going to take one thing away from this whole discussion we're going to have here, homestead. Look at the homestead. The tax freeze programs are also very good. The senior tax freeze, not for all seniors, but some, okay? Property tax bills will be frozen at the amount they were first eligible for when the program began back to 2018. There are income limits on this and age limits. You can call 215-686-6442 or go to phila.gov/senior freeze to learn more about this and see if you're eligible. All right. And you can call and talk to somebody. They'll talk to you. The deadline for this is September 30th. Another problem here is all the deadlines are different. So it's hard to keep track of everything. But that deadline's coming up. All right. The best way to get around the deadlines is to apply now and start looking into this now. Low income tax freeze. Property owners who meet income qualifications can freeze property tax bills at the amount from the previous year. That deadline is actually like January 31st of 2025. Again, another one. This is a new program. Again, I recommend you look at it now. The long-time owner occupant program, LOOP. Property owners may be eligible if their property assessment increased at least 50% over the last year or 75% over the last 5 years. Income requirements and living in the home for the past 10 years apply. Phila.gov/loop for that one. The owner-occupied payment agreement program allows homeowners to make affordable monthly payments on property taxes that are past due or delinquent. All right. And it'll protect you from sheriff sale. You may qualify for a $0 a month payment agreement. So if you're looking down the barrel of a significant arrears on your taxes, look into this program because it can help keep you in your house. Phila.gov /OOPA. And that's the last one. So this is going to be in our newsletter. We're going to have all this stuff to show people. Make sure, again, start on this now. This is a very easy thing to lose track of. Very easy. And if you miss out on the appeals, that's it. Some of the programs, the deadlines are, a little farther out, but I wouldn't look at it that way. If you're interested in any of these programs, I would start now just to make sure. Now we're running pretty tight. So what we're going to do is go to our interview with Marissa Waxman about the final city budget. When we come back, Denise, you're going to tell us where you were yesterday. So here's our interview with Marissa Waxman. All right, Marissa Waxman, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
So before we get into the budget specifically, can you tell us a little bit about PICA and what it does?
Sure. So PICA is an independent state authority that was created in 1991 when the city's finances were just an absolute catastrophe. And so we were created to do a couple different things, but basically get the city back on sound fiscal footing. Nobody would lend the city money at that point, and they'd run out of its own. And so PICA was able to borrow and allow the city to keep paying its bills, paying its staff. But in return for that, basically co-signing on those loans, the city of Philadelphia needed to make sure that it was using responsible budgetary practices, doing long-range planning. And so PICA's ongoing role has been to monitor the city's finances and make sure that it continues to be producing 5-year financial plans that meet the criteria in the PICA Act. And really, it's a pretty big deal because the city, if it's unable to demonstrate that it's being responsible with its money and doing that, all state dollars are withheld from the city until a plan is together that's fruitful. And that's about $1 billion a year. Mm-hmm. And so the city has been able to keep itself in good shape, improve its credit ratings, improve its fund balance over time, in part because of this requirement to meet the obligations and criteria of the PICA Act.
And what are some of those things that would cause PICA and the state to say, oh, this is a problem, we could get to that place?
So, the Act has some smaller things that are a little more check the box. Is the city doing cash flows? Is it, giving us information about the number of employees? But really the main thing that would cause the city's plan to be in variance with, where it's supposed to be is a negative fund balance. If the city gets to a point where between the money it started with in its bank account and the money it brought in over the course of the year, if it spends more than that and goes negative, that's when the city needs to sort of look at what it's doing and come up with a new plan that can be approved by the PICA board. So negative fund balances, spending more money than you have, that's really the main objective. But it also needs to be, when it's making these projections, using reasonable assumptions. It can't just be like, what? We're going to get 17 times as much money from this tax next year as we did last year for no reason. And by the way, salt for snowing roads is, going to cost 10% of what it did last year. We might be like, that's not really reasonable. So they have to make sure that when they're creating their budget, it's based on reasonable assumptions.
So, you served in the city government working on budget. You're doing this now. So you've seen it from all different angles. What is that budget process like? How does it start? How do you get from where it begins to where it gets to PICA? What does that look like?
So it's a long process, and PICA is involved with the city at different points. But the city starts its process usually late fall and into the winter. And what's happening then is the city is working with outside economists to develop its revenue estimates, trying to figure out how much money it's going to have. And then they're also trying to figure out what it wants to do. And that means talking to a mayor about what are their priorities and what do they want to make sure they're focused on. It means talking to individual departments to figure out how much is it going to cost to keep doing what you're doing. Sometimes, you had a one-time purchase last year and you don't need to buy another photocopier or trash truck. So maybe the costs are going to go down to keep doing what you're doing. Other times there might be inflation or other reasons why the cost is going to go up just to keep doing what you're doing. And they also have to look at, are there, legal changes that mandate spending in certain areas, court-ordered requirements. And so they go through a process of first figuring out how much it'll cost to maintain the status quo, just keep doing what they're doing. But then they figure out based on community needs, the mayor's priorities, new laws that have passed, where might we need to add more? Where are we going to wind up spending less? And that all comes together in the mayor's budget proposal, which comes out usually in the first week of March. Pike has already been involved a little bit before that point. Usually in February, we convene a group of economists and other subject matter experts at the Federal Reserve in partnership with them to kick the tires on the city's revenue estimates. As I said, PICA cares a lot about, are the projections reasonable? And so before the city even presents its revenue estimates to the public in the mayor's proposal, we help pull together a group to look at what they're thinking and be like, maybe that looks a little, too optimistic, or maybe you're being a bit too conservative over here. We're able to facilitate the city getting that feedback so that they can make some adjustments if needed before they present. Once the city presents its budget and the mayor does their budget address, then there's an entire process with city council and the administration and council go back and forth. There are hearings, there are negotiations, but every year, eventually council passes a budget, and that's then the final version. Based on that one-year budget, because council only winds up approving the next 12 months. The city still, for PICA, needs to do a 5-year plan. And so it usually only takes them from that point 2 weeks or so to make any adjustments based on the final version that came out of city council of a 1-year budget. Okay, how does that flow through and change the 5-year plan? They present that to PICA, and PICA's board has 30 days to approve that plan. So before that point, PICA staff have been meeting with departments, meeting with finance leadership, just to make sure we understand everything, asking questions. But the moment we get that final version, we've got 30 days to do all of our analysis. And we bring in an outside economist to, again, look at the city's revenue estimates. We work with the city controller's office who makes sure that the plan was done in accordance with accounting standards, and they do their own revenue estimate. We're asking follow-up questions, and the staff at PICA put together a report for our board to review. And within that 30-day window, our board is expected to vote on whether or not the city's plan meets the criteria that are in the legislation. And again, the most important one is that budget balanced for 5 years? And are all of the assumptions that get you to a balanced budget reasonable?
So we're recording this on a Monday. It's going to air on Wednesday. The big story this morning is Japanese, I believe it's Japanese money markets are in trouble. There's a ripple effect. When you're looking at this budget, this 5-year plan, those things to me seem unpredictable. But is there a way that that's factored into your assessment, and the assessment of the city is, well, in a couple of years, something could happen. How do we look at that? What do we do? How does that kind of work from your end?
So there's sort of two things. One, we do work with economists, and we are trying to figure out, is the economy going to soften, or is there going to be a challenge here? What should we expect interest rates to be? But you're right, it is impossible to get that on the nose. Part of what we do, though, the reason we don't just ask one person, but we pull together groups of economists, and we have our economists, and we ask the controller's office, is you try and get to some level of consensus, but that is still no guarantee. So the other part of that PICA advocates for is having adequate reserves. Have a cushion in your budget, so when the unexpected happens, it's not immediately a catastrophe. And the PICA Act does not require any reserves. So we wouldn't necessarily disapprove a plan that didn't have enough cushion, a large fund balance, or a rainy day fund. But our report does advocate for that. Our board advocates for that, is that you have to have a cushion, the same way you might for your own household budget, have some money set aside in case the boiler goes, in case, something's wrong with the car. Well, if something's wrong with the economy, or there's, a major weather event, it's really good for the city to have funds set aside. And the Government Finance Officers Association, they recommend having about 2 months of revenues or spending set aside. The city knows that, we're in a tough place, that, for some folks, it's already raining, and to cut back on services to set money aside would be a challenge. So they set a lower bar of about 6 to 8% of their revenues. But, some of the challenges in this plan that the city presented is that they're not even hitting that bar consistently in each of the 5 years. So that's an area of concern. When we do this PICA report, we both note, okay, it's met all of the, requirements in the act. It is balanced, and it is, based on reasonable assumptions. But we also identify a number of risks, things that could, if they happen, and that there is some likelihood they would happen, could be problematic. And having identified those risks, it really hits home why the city should prioritize making sure we have adequate reserves, so that when something goes sideways, we have time to figure out how to respond. Really, what a reserve does, if you've got so much of them, it solves your problem. Philadelphia is not likely to be in that position, but it buys you time to figure out, is this a short-term problem or permanent? Are there things, buys you time to figure out how you're going to adapt. And that's what's important.
Is there maybe an industry standard or standards that you look at where you get that budget and you say, all right, well, 25% going towards public safety, and I'm just making stuff up, right? 25% going towards sanitation, that kind of stuff. Do you look at it in those terms as key investments to make a structured budget? Is that kind of how it works?
So we don't necessarily, every city is different. Every community decides, do we want more of this, less of that? And Philadelphia is actually extra unique in that we are a city and a county. So there aren't many places that provide the whole range. So we wouldn't necessarily look at, we're spending a lot, but we do look and see, are there trends? And there are some areas where, we have to spend money, but you don't necessarily want that to be a growing share. For example, debt service. When we borrow money, we have to pay it back. And if we are paying a lot because our interest rates are high because we have bad credit, that's not good. You don't want to see that. You want to make sure that certain areas are not completely out of alignment with other places, that if our benefit costs for our city employees were growing a lot faster than other places, that would raise some questions. So there are areas where we look at benchmarks, not necessarily in terms of the service delivery, because that really reflects local priorities, local choices. But things like, if our utility costs all of a sudden were spiking, that'd be something that we'd have questions about and want to understand based on historical patterns why something is growing or changing. Because sometimes that's deliberate and a choice. In recent years, the share of the budget that went to education grew significantly. That was a choice. In Mayor Parker's first budget and 5-year plan, you can see that there's really a lot of growth in clean and green and sanitation. That's a choice. So we're more looking for things like, are they making, good choices when it comes to how we're buying fuel for our vehicles, or the interest rates we get when we borrow money. Those are the things that financial planning and management, we can look to other cities.
And you had mentioned debt. This wasn't the question I was going to ask, but it just popped into my head. When we look at the debt, I personally, I think, well, a little bit of debt's fine, right? Because that's how we build things. And even, when we're talking about interest rates, it would seem to me, and I am not informed really, that a little bit of inflation might not be the end of the world, right? Because then that means if you have a long-term debt, you're paying a little less, maybe, right? Maybe. But are we, when we look at the city's debt, is there a tipping point where you would say, that might be too much? Go ahead.
Yeah, so the city itself even has a debt policy, and it looks at a couple different slices with and without pension. And they set benchmarks of, it shouldn't get to be, and I apologize, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but X percent, we shouldn't get above this amount. And they've been keeping within that. So one is seeing what bar has the city set for itself, and is it following that? Because at a minimum, if it's not even following its own guidelines, then you have to question, hey, what's going on here? And then you do go out and you look at other places. And, if we got to a point where half our budget was debt, well, that really makes it hard if something happens, if we have a new need, or if our revenues go away, because you don't have much room to maneuver. So, while I don't necessarily have a specific threshold where we'd get worried, we more look at patterns and trends. Is our amount of debt growing? And if it is, that may not necessarily be the end, because sometimes it makes sense. Sometimes, it's addressing things that need to be addressed. But it is a trend we look at and monitor. And another important thing is, being able to demonstrate that we are good fiscal stewards as a city, is important in keeping our, bond ratings high, and that lets us borrow money more cheaply. And so that's really important, is thinking about, how the interplay between the entire budget and the decisions we make and the cost of debt.
Can Philadelphians feel like we're on solid footing for the next 5 years in this 5-year plan?
I would say yes, that, we found there are positive fund balances. They are based on reasonable assumptions. That said, there are some real areas for concern that we continue to have that's important. We looked at about 9 different fiscal indicators for the city, and we got input from, local experts, the city itself. These are measures that are looked at in other areas. And I'll preface this by saying, because we're PICA, we're always somewhat concerned about any measure, no matter how good it looks. And in some areas, though, we only had minimal concern. Areas like the city's credit rating, currently the highest in 40 years. That was great. And our tax collections, we've been pretty good at making sure they're coming in as we've estimated them. And that they're actually growing from our local taxes and fees and fines. So those are areas where we had minimal concern. There are some areas, though, where we've got significant concerns. Things like our amount of fund balance as a percent of revenues. As I said, you need that cushion, and the PICA Act doesn't require a specific amount, but Philadelphia's is pretty low compared to peers, compared to, best practice. We also have some concerns about our pension fund, and that is an area where our pension fund, things have been getting better. The city has been committed to getting that fully funded, but we're not there yet. And so having a pension fund, which are, the promises we've made to former and current employees, and those must be met, making sure we have set aside enough money for that is really important, because if we get to a point where there's a crunch, day-to-day services could suffer if we haven't put enough away for our pension. And so we're still looking to see that improvement continue, that commitment continue, so that we can get to the point where we know we have everything set aside for future pensions that we need. There's been a lot of progress there. We're just not there yet.
So now that you've gotten through this part, does it kind of start over for you now at PICA? Or when does that begin?
It really does. So there's a couple of things happening. We do know that, labor costs are close to 2/3 of the city budget. And right now, the city's white and blue collar unions don't have contracts in place. And also our uniform, the firefighters and the police only have contracts through next summer. And so seeing how those contract negotiations go may have a really significant impact on the city's finances, because that's such a big chunk of where our money goes. And so we'll be watching those processes unfold, and depending upon what those union contracts look like, there may be impacts on the balancing of the city's books. And so we'll be watching that. We also just every quarter are monitoring the city's finances. The city and PICA have agreed to a set of reports that are put out each quarter, looking at revenue, spending, how many staffers we have, what's going on with performance. And so we're constantly monitoring that, just to make sure that the city is staying in alignment with the plan that the city approved. But then we'll get to budget season again.
So where can people find all the information about PICA and all the reports and everything. And I recommend people take a look at this.
So you can find it all at www.picapa.org. That's PICAPA.org. You can also follow us on LinkedIn. We've started posting there. That's the only social media we're on, but feel free to find us on LinkedIn.
All right, Marissa Waxman, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much, Larry. Love getting to chat about this. Thank you.
All right, we'd like to thank Marissa Waxman for joining us and always coming on the show and always making this easier to understand for everybody. We really appreciate it. Now, Denise, where were you the other day?
Well, Temple University played host to Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris and her new running mate. See, I speak for a living, I just don't always do it well. Tim Walz, not Walz, because some people have been getting that wrong. It was their first appearance as running mates for president. And part of the reason I went was because I wanted to see how Philadelphians and how Pennsylvanians in general were reacting to the fact that Governor Josh Shapiro, who was also rumored to be the vice presidential pick. In fact, he was so rumored to be the vice presidential pick that the mayor's office released a video endorsing he and Harris as running mates. More about that later. I just wanted to see what people thought about the ticket. Would they be more interested in voting or less interested in voting without a Pennsylvanian on the ticket? And just to see the sights and sounds.
And I saw clips. Mm-hmm. The mood was about as festive and upbeat as I feel like it could have been watching on television. Was that your observation?
Well, yeah. I mean, all the people that were there were very excited to be there. And I asked a few folks, as part of my reporting, will this, are you still excited without Shapiro being on the ticket? And Jeffrey Young, council member Jeffrey Young, gave me probably the best answer, which was, while it would have been nice for the home team to get a win here, meaning Shapiro, we've got a democracy to save. And that was the general attitude of just about everybody in that room. Would we have liked to have seen Shapiro as the VP for the ticket? Yeah, but we have bigger fish to fry. And even Shapiro himself, who gave a rousing speech as part of the rally yesterday, said, one, that he was very dedicated to being Pennsylvania's governor and he wanted to do the best for Pennsylvania. And also that he was invested in getting Kamala Harris, the current vice president, and Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota over the finish line.
Yeah. So
it was very energetic. It was weird. It was like, usually you don't get this kind of energy from an appearance before the Democratic National Convention, which takes place not this coming week, but the next week. It starts on the 19th, I believe. Mm-hmm. And usually this is the kind of thing that happens after the convention, where the nominee comes out and, the vice presidential nominee comes out and they get like a rousing send-off from whatever state they've decided is the most important to do that send-off. And in 2016, it was Philadelphia because the Democratic National Convention had just been here. In 2020, it was Wilmington, Delaware, because it was a virtual convention. I don't know where it's going to be after the Chicago convention, but it had that kind of atmosphere yesterday. And what was most interesting to me was that, you have this race coming up and everything is truncated, because normally most of the stuff that you would have seen, that you saw yesterday, you would have, seen come down the pike a little, there would have been a little more room. But with President Joe Biden basically kicking himself off the ticket only a few weeks ago, and Vice President Harris having to find a running mate with roughly 90 days left before Election Day, everything felt kind of rushed and kind of truncated. It's going to be interesting to see how this manifests itself during the convention itself, because again, you have that rush, and meanwhile you've had Donald Trump, even though the Republican nominee, even though he hasn't always been doing this with his running mate, but he's been running for a while. He's been campaigning for a while. He already has introduced himself to voters. And while Vice President Harris has also introduced herself to voters, it hasn't been at the level that Donald Trump has been able to, because she hasn't been running as long as she has been running. She's been running as the number 2, not as the number 1. And Tim Walz is kind of going to have to do, people outside of the Midwest, and that was a calculation when this pick was announced. People outside the Midwest don't really know who Tim Walz is unless they watch, a little bit of MSNBC, because he's been on a lot lately, especially since he was being talked up as a possible vice presidential candidate. But the reason why, or one of the reasons that my sources are telling me that he was selected, was because Vice President Harris is from the West Coast. If Josh Shapiro would have been the nominee, he's from the East Coast. Folks believe that in order for her to get the kind of traction she needed, particularly among non-college educated white men, she needed to have somebody from the Midwest. And Tim Walz fills that bill. But another thing that I was also personally, interested in, which I didn't know, is that Governor Walz is a command sergeant major in the United States Army. That is the highest rank you can get as a non-commissioned officer. Now, a commissioned officer is someone who went through the ROTC program in college and became an officer that way. Non-commissioned officers, it's a much harder road. You have to prove your leadership. There's lots of tests you have to take, and they monitor everything about you, including how your family conducts itself. And I know this because I had to go through it with my father getting promoted as a non-commissioned officer. We were screened as much as my father himself was. So it's going to be interesting to see, and I'm already starting to see some of it on right-wing Twitter, where people are, kind of being dismissive of the service. It's going to be interesting to see if they're able to do the kind of swift voting job that they were able to do to John Kerry when he ran for office, to Governor Walz. But as the daughter of a sergeant major, I wish them luck with that. They're tough guys.
No, I don't think those kind of things are going to work on this guy.
No.
I think Harris made the right choice, because I think this guy's the perfect counterpoint to the Trump-Vance ticket. But we have to leave it there. We're going to talk more about this for sure over the next few months, because that's all that's going to be going on. Next week on the show, Rebecca Lopez-Chris will join us from the Revenue Department to talk more about property taxes and property tax programs. We're going to be all in on this for the next couple of months. So we'll see you next week on Hall Monitor.